Good afternoon. We're in the afternoon hours of a lovely day in June, and on the call with me today is Stephen Perez with Americanna Labs, and today's topic is going to be an interesting one for us. We're going to move away from quote unquote the marijuana world for a second and talk about the testing world of hemp and CBD. We all know that the hemp world in the state of Florida is, excuse the pun, but growing rapidly. A number of licenses are given out, no question, surpass that of medical marijuana being grown in the state. And I got Stephen here because if you are planning to do it, if you've already got your license, you're ready to go into the ground, you got your seeds, how do you make sure that you're doing it right? So we're going to carry you through the process of planting, testing, processing, and then product of CBD. So Stephen, let's start off. Introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks, Charles. It's great to be here with you. So yes, I'm Steve Perez, the CEO of Americanna Laboratories. We are one of the hemp testing laboratories that the state of Florida has certified to be a hemp testing laboratory. We're also USDA approved testing laboratory, and that means that there's certain accreditation, certain things that we need to be doing here at the lab to make sure that our testing is the highest quality. The first and foremost, of course, is being ISO accredited, which we are, and that we hold a DEA license, and we do. And so here at Americanna, we want to put the customers, the clients first, and so appreciate the time to come talk to you.
Well, let's kind of give you a landscape situation. Stephen's lab is located up in the Jacksonville area. Secret location, not going to tell you where it is, but it's up in Jacksonville. But he covers the entire state, what I would say from Pensacola down to the Keys.
We do.
And cover any kind of grow that's going on. So Stephen, let's start off. Let's assume today that I got a license to grow hemp, and I have a farm that has thousands of acres. What is my best methodology to use to grow hemp, having it tested and making sure that I have minimized my downside risk? What would you suggest as a testing lab, which is required by the state?
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The first and most important recommendation, of course, is to have a plan, right? Your things that you're going to be thinking about are what strains, where am I going to get my certified seed from? These are questions that every cultivator, every farmer has right now, if they haven't already received their seeds, is where am I going to get seed? What strains are going to be popular? How am I going to get the most CBD production? So those are questions that are going through a lot of people's minds right now. And then the next question is going to be how much do I grow? Is it an acre? Is it 1,000, 10,000? Am I growing indoors? Am I growing outdoors? So really, you've got to have a plan and know how much you're going to be growing. And then the next thing is how do I stay compliant, right? So I need to partner up with a laboratory that knows and understands how to test accurately and provide good, sound scientific results, and then can help me be successful, right? So I don't have any surprises when I go to get that compliance test, and all of a sudden my plot's hot. So we've developed a program where farmers can partner with us, and we'll help monitor their products, their crops leading up to harvest, and also provide for them that compliance test. And really, size of the plot is going to be important as well. You want to mitigate any kind of risk that you might have if that crop does go hot, above that 0.3% THC. So, a farmer can plant 1,000 acres as one contiguous plot if they want, but we're really recommending that for this first year at least, to keep your size more manageable.
Now, in doing that, now we're gonna kind of stop for a second and talk about, okay, so we know that we can plant 1,000 acres with one strain, and have it all tested. Not necessarily the best thing to do, because
Probably.
what happens if you're in the middle of your testing that is required by the state? This is not voluntary. This is mandatory by the state. If
That's
your
right.
crop is coming in hot, and explain what that means for people, if it's coming in
Right.
hot.
Yeah, so we do, it's called a potency test or a cannabinoid test, and we test currently our standard potency profile test for 11 different cannabinoids. The important ones that people are most worried about are, what are my THC levels, what are my CBD levels, but by the state, they've mandated that that their crop cannot go above the 0.3% total THC. So that total THC includes also THCA, which a lot of people, been a lot of questions about what does total THC mean, and it means it's the addition of that THC plus the THCA times a molecular factor of 0.877. So that's very important. Everyone should understand what that total THC number really represents, and that number, according to Florida, cannot be above 0.3% THC. So that's what we mean about going hot, basically going above that 0.3%.
So we're going to, again, stop for another second. So
Sure.
whether I am producing hemp for CBD or hemp as an industrial product, let's say for clothing, for building products, for whatever the industrial hemp can be used for, is
Right.
there a difference with my crop, or is it, how does that work?
As of right now, there's no distinguishing between industrial hemp and hemp grown for CBD. I know it's a huge topic. A lot of people are taking that up with the state, and they feel that if my hemp is going to go into clothing, or there's a lot of people talking about using hemp for plastics and things like this, building materials. There's a lot of applications for hemp, industrial hemp in particular. So there's a lot of people saying, well, if I'm growing it for these types of products, why do I even care? No one's going to consume this. No one's going to eat this or smoke this or anything. Why do I need to test for that THC? So right now, as far as Florida is concerned, they don't make that separation between those two. So if you have a license, if you were awarded a license in the state of Florida to be a hemp cultivator, and there have been about 320 plus licenses that have been handed out, with probably another 1,000 or so that are still waiting. Then you have to comply with the law that states that within the 15 days of harvest, you have to test for your potency, and your THC cannot be higher than the 0.3%.
And again, to make it really clear, whether you're doing it for CBD, smokables, edibles, whatever it may be, or industrial, it makes no difference. Today, right now, June
That's right.
2020, you must have it tested. It must be below the 0.03%.
Absolutely. That is absolutely right, Charles. It has to be below that 0.3, despite whether it's industrial or hemp for CBD.
So let's go into a little bit of plotting. Again, I have 10,000 acres. I may want to do 5 or 6 different strains. If your testing takes place and you're testing 2 acres or 10 acres of a certain strain, and I say, okay, I'm growing this all here, test this. Is it smart to do it that way, or are you better off breaking out the plots and testing it separately, just in case there's a problem? What would you suggest as a tester?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You want to mitigate that risk, right? So the larger the grow, the more potential that you may lose that investment, right? So if you have 10,000 acres and let's say you split that up into 1,000 acre plots for different strains, let's say, if that compliance test comes back positive, that you've gone hot, again, above that 0.3% THC, your total THC, then you have to remediate that entire 1,000 acres, which part of that could potentially be destroying it. So you could lose that investment. And we all know that hemp seed is not cheap.
Right. So if you have to do that, basically you must destroy your crop in one way or another. You can't resell it someplace else at this point. I
No,
know they were talking about it, but you can't do that at this point.
that's another argument that a lot of
Right.
people are making. Well, if it goes above the 0.3, perhaps I could sell it as a low THC product, maybe to an MMTC or something like that. But as of right now, that's not an option for hemp cultivators.
And as we all know, in the state of Florida, if you don't play by the rules, you're in big trouble.
Absolutely.
So anyways, so the key takeaway right there is that if you're planning to grow, make a smaller plot rather than larger ones, although testing may be more. To do that, you're having an insurance policy that you're not having to destroy more than may have to be destroyed if you go hot in certain areas.
Yeah, it's always a risk reward,
Right.
right, Charles? So if some of these larger cultivators, we've talked to many of them who are going several thousand acres. Some of them are growing indoors, so they're doing several hundreds of thousands of square feet worth of.
And that's more controllable. I guess indoor is more controllable also.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of cultivators have really considered the indoor greenhouse grow as really maybe the only viable option here in Florida, just because of so many pressures. You've got the humidity, you've got insects, you've got everything grows in Florida, right? So competing with weeds and other pests. But yeah.
Oh, good. So let's say our crop comes in, it's tested. So tell us the testing process. So I'm ready to take the state to the next level. My crop is okay. I've done my pre-testing. Now what do I need to do as a farmer? What's my next step to get approval by the state to be able to sell it to a processor? What do I need to do?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to consider. So right now, the most important test that FDAX and the state of Florida is looking for is that potency test, right? So between that 15-day window before harvest, you have to get that test for THC, right? So that's your first step of compliance. So you would send it to a lab like Americanna. We would test it for you. We submit the paperwork to the state. And then essentially you'll get permission to do your harvest. And then at that point, you have to consider the second kind of, I would say, compliance requirement that, if you're going to send this to, let's say, an extractor, a processor who's going to, extract your crop, they're going to want to know what's in there. Pesticides, micro, fungal, heavy metals, all of these things are big question marks at this point. And so we offer, again, a full panel service where we do quite a bit of additional testings beyond that potency test that'll give you, kind of that comfort level that, hey, my product, is safe to go into extraction. It's safe to go eventually into some derivative product, whether it be a tincture, a gummy bear, or some other edible. So that's going to be very important leading up to sending your product to a processor.
So is that test done at the same time as that first one, or is it done after harvest?
It can be. It can be done at the same time. The turnaround time is so critical for that potency compliance test that we want to what we're telling our clients is we want to have that answer to the state of Florida within 48 hours, so that there's no delay and there's nothing that's going to stop you from getting to harvest. And so that's our main focus at that point, is to get that potency data to the state so that you can continue on with your harvest. But that's not to say that we can't then also move forward with additional testing for for those other things like pesticides and mycotoxins, heavy metals that are so important to have that information. It's arming the cultivator with that knowledge, that data, to show and to feel confident that they have a good product.
Well, basically what they want to do is make sure that the product that they're telling the processor they're selling is actually the product.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So that certificate, then you would have a third party certificate that the farmer would be able to turn over to the processor, and the processor would have confidence in that batch.
Right.
That batch is clean.
Right. What we see, and it's very, it happens all the time though, especially in kind of this the world that we, hemp and cannabis is still very much Wild West, and here on the East Side, we're still lagging behind, I think, the West Coast in some respects. But what we do see is that even processors will request an additional test. So they'll say, okay, yeah, you've got your sample tested at, lab XYZ, but we want to send it now to our own lab and have it tested and kind of see how they, how they fit if it matches up. So that's where sampling comes into play. We haven't talked about sampling yet.
Right.
That's critical. That's probably the largest area of potential error that you can find in data is in sampling.
So let's talk about that for a second. So as a lab, part if you're certifying something, you have to have the analytics behind it, the sampling behind it, to say that it's a valid sample for an entire crop. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I will say it's not an easy job to pick a representative sample. Our laboratories here have been doing testing for agrochemicals for over 30 years. And so we very much understand what that a representative sample means as far as testing is concerned. So we use a lot of the same kind of SOPs and guidelines that have been developed by the EPA to decide where, and how we collect samples from a hemp farm. There has to be randomization. So they're really, just like the farmer has a plan of how they're going to plant and what they're going to plant, we have to have a plan on how to collect the sample. And so that's something that we usually share ahead of time with the cultivator, the farmers, and agree upon ahead of time so that we know that the sample we're getting from their field, their plot, is the most representative of that plot. And therefore, then the data that we're presenting from the testing is going to be representative of their plot as well.
Right, and we were talking before we actually went on the air, the whole concept of the larger the plot that you're testing, the bigger problem it could be because of area-wise.
Right. Yeah. So the state of Florida has a table, and it's a long table. It takes up a couple of pages, or a page and a half or so, of how many samples you have to collect depending on the acreage. And so, I think up till 10 acres, you have to pick a subsample per acre. So if you have a 10-acre plot, then I have to pick 10 subsamples from that plot and then homogenize those samples together to get the representative picture of that plot.
So you're putting it all together in one and then testing that one, not testing individually.
Correct. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And so obviously you can, and there's a formula that they use so as you go up in acreage, if you hit 1,000, you're collecting probably 70 or so subsamples. If you hit 10,000, forget it. You might as well, you're going to be collecting a week.
Right. So, and again, there is a science behind doing it correctly and minimizing risk.
Absolutely.
Well, that's the farmer side of it. So now there are different licenses within the state of what you can do. So now I become a processor, and there are a lot of people out there that are just processing.
Absolutely.
I've seen some stuff at shows where they take a big rig out to your farm and they basically process it right there. I mean,
absolutely.
In fact, we were at that show when we saw that they had that big rig out there. It's like I said, it's amazing.
That was really neat.
It's kind of like something out of science fiction. They take it out, they process it right there in the field for you.
Absolutely.
So they're the processor. Now, again, dealing with labs, they have to assure that their product that they're processing coming out, as I would say, after they put it into the mix master process,
right,
that is coming out according to regulations to be able to sell to the people that are now making the CBD products, correct?
Sure, that's correct. Yeah. So again, it's a lot of the same tests. The pesticides, the heavy metals, the micro and the mold type of tests that we're doing for the processor as well. But now the processor has to consider also any solvents that they use for extraction. So that's very popular right now is ethanol extraction, for example, and CO2 extraction. So for ethanol extraction, really for any extraction, it's a requirement that we test for residual solvents. So
Hmm.
any of these solvents that are being used for extraction could potentially exist at residual levels within, your distillates, within your isolates, crude oils, the product that's going to move on then to kind of a retail manufacturing situation. So it's very important because some of those levels, those residual solvents levels, could be problematic later on down the line.
And again, they have to do that in a reasonable batch fashion also, I would assume.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Typically by batch, we always recommend that you don't just take off the top, a certain sample and send it to us, that you're doing due diligence and getting it from different areas of your batch. If it's in a drum type of situation, top, middle, bottom is always good.
Mhm.
Just those kind of things that, that make sense in sampling. Again, it's all about creating a representative sample, because really if it's garbage in, you're going to get garbage out, right? So if it's not a representative sample, then those test results, that really, it could be a huge reason why there's so much variation from lab to lab. It's just because they're not getting the same sample, honestly.
Now, in that kind of processing, if I got this big drum of doing it, do you go out and get or you rely on them giving you the sample?
So
Stephen?
typically that's something that they do. They
Okay.
send us the sample. If they want us to collect, that's something that we can work with them.
Mhm.
But most of the time, some of these facilities, they don't like people walking in and messing
Right.
with the product, because you could end up contaminating the product if you don't know what you're doing. But these guys, they do know what they're doing, and it's to their best interest that they take a representative sample, right? So so that there's no surprises downstream.
Now, was that a separate license in the state of Florida for processing?
I think it's under the same cultivator license. I think it
Oh, is
is.
that right? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I'm not sure, but so now we're through that. We now have some clean product coming out,
Right.
and we're going down to either a large shop or a mom and pop shop that's buying
Right.
it.
Right.
They're now adding certain things to it, adding certain terpenes to it,
Sure.
adding
Sure.
whatever they may be adding to it. I mean, you see a lot of stuff. All of a sudden, you see CBD
Right.
with what's the sleep medicine I'm thinking about? I can't think of it right now offhand. Anyway, but you're adding things to it. Those
Sure.
have to be tested. You can't rely on that test coming from your processor
Right.
that says, okay, I'm going to throw this on my label when I've added things to it. Am I correct or incorrect?
Oh no, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I kind of think of it as anytime you put anything into something, you're adding, whether you're formulating with an MCT oil, or you're formulating with some other type of
Mhm.
diluent, or you're gonna want to test, because you don't know what's in that product, what's in those inputs, right? So
Mhm.
uh, there could potentially be some heavy metal contamination or pesticide contamination that you don't know about. Maybe in your formulation process, there's something that might lead to some kind of microbial growth. Those are questions that any reasonable person is going to have once you start formulating these products.
So the law, I guess, reads that if I'm producing a CBD product,
Hmm.
I must have an independent lab certificate
Yeah,
attached to that individual product or batch where it came from.
absolutely.
Now, if I'm buying a product, and this is, I don't know the answer, but if I'm buying a product and I look at this label, and all of a sudden I see a certificate a certificate
Of analysis.
of analysis, okay,
Mhm.
and that certificate of analysis is coming from the processor,
Mm.
okay, is that good or bad?
Yeah, you hear a lot about these processors. They set up their own facility, their own lab facilities. They've got they spend all this money on instrumentation. They get a whole lab crew. They want to know
Mm.
themselves. They think that they can do it better. And I'm not saying that they can't. There's a lot of really smart people out there in this industry. But unfortunately, it has to be an independent third party lab. The good ones, the ones that we've been talking to, they all understand the importance of sending it to an independent lab, because it's just you want to have that understanding, that certainty that you're not falsifying data, you're not manipulating data, you're not presenting something that it's not.
So, and again, you're probably more up to this than I am. I'm producing CBD edibles, which are
very popular.
which are very popular in the state of Florida.
You do a lot of gummies.
That's right, a lot of gummies, candy bars, variety of different things.
Chocolate.
That's right, absolutely. The certificate or the batch on that, how does that relate to? Does that relate to the entire product, or just to the CBD inside the product?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I think is not well understood. We work with people sometimes that they'll send us one gummy, in a Ziploc bag, and they expect that the analysis of that one gummy is going to be equivalent to their entire batch, and really, unfortunately, we've our labs here have been under FDA scrutiny. We've had I think 6 or 7 different FDA audits. We've worked in the pharmaceutical space, food safety space, so we always have been working on as a GLP lab under FDA and EPA guidelines and regulations. So if you look at pharmaceutical, and I'm not saying that gummies are on the level of pharmaceutical, but I think eventually you're going to see that these types of products are going to be moving more and more towards a pharmaceutical. They're going to want to show that yes, these are pharmaceutical grade. Because a lot of people are using this as medicine. It's
right,
not,
exactly.
CBD. It's not going to give you a high like the THC, right? So there has to be a reason. Why are you taking CBD? Well, it helps with my back pain. It helps with this. It helps with that. So it's going towards a more of it's medicine, right? And so it's going to be important that product is safe. And so again, it goes back to garbage in, garbage out. If I'm only testing one gummy out of 10,000 gummies or 1 million gummies, let's say, is that really a representative sample? And so we always recommend to our clients that we want to see, don't just send me that one gummy that you picked off of the top of the lot. Send us a retail batch. What are you putting on the shelves? Are you putting a container on the shelf? Because now that's going to be in contact with the inside of the container that potentially could have some contamination, let's say of micro or coli or whatever it might be. Send us what you're putting on the shelves, and that then to us is going to say, yeah, now we're looking at a representative batch. Maybe it's a couple of bottles of 30 counts or
right.
whatever you're selling. That now we have a little bit more understanding. Yes, this could now represent that entire lot.
But who? And to go a little deeper dive into that, whose responsibility is that? So if I'm out there and I'm into a store buying some CBD products and I pull one off the shelf and I see it looks good to me, it has the COA on it and
right.
it has this as
right.
How do I know based on what the laws are that truly is representative, like almost similar to the hemp fields, that I know that field has been tested? How
right.
confident do I feel that product in a large batch has been tested correctly? What is no laws relating to it?
You're asking all the right questions, Charles. I mean, these are the questions that show just how far we have left to go.
So we're not there yet. Is basically what we're saying. We're not there.
I don't think so. I honestly, I don't think so. If you think about the amount of testing that the other food products go through, there's a long way to go.
I mean, the testing that medical marijuana goes through right now. I mean,
no, absolutely. You have to
crazy.
record, what's the size of your batch. You have to know, trace it back to seed. All of those things. I really see hemp needing to go in that direction eventually. They're going to need to use, like the metrics, the BioTrax of the MMTC world. It's going to be absolute necessity. Because think about it right now. If people eat vegetables and they get sick, well, a lot of people don't know, a lot of that is very highly tracked. So within hours, within days, they know, where did that head of lettuce, for example, come from? That
Right.
came from this farm, this field. It was picked by, this person or this combine or and we really need to be there in the hemp world as well.
So the hemp world and CBD world is not there yet, based on
Yeah,
FDA requirements.
I don't think so. It's really, I think FDA is working on some things, and from what I understand, they're going to be coming out with some guidelines pretty soon. We'll see. But what I would say is the people who are doing right by their customers, they're already there. They're
Already there. They've been testing for a while, correct?
But me as a consumer, you as a consumer, walking into a store and picking up a bottle of let's say some strawberry gummies.
Right.
It's hard. It's hard to tell. It's hard to really know whether that vendor, that supplier, is doing due diligence and making sure that, hey, me as a consumer, I'm going to be protected.
Unless you know the vendor, you have that COA on there.
Right.
You're at least getting some background. But when you start seeing off brands sitting on shelves,
sure.
that not a red flag should go up, but you got to take a little deep dive into the manufacturer of it. Just because to have the COA on doesn't mean necessarily that it is 100% correct.
Right. Well, you've seen, so the state of Florida is now requiring, they're mandating very specific wordage, on the labels,
Right.
They're moving in that right direction. It's going that.
Oh, we're still early. We're still early in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still very primitive. We're still cavemen when it comes to some of this stuff.
Oh, that's great. Any other words, Stephen, about? So basically, we've covered the farmer, we've covered the processor, and we've also covered the person who is producing CBD products for you and I to use. All of it needs testing, and people shouldn't deal with a product unless it's been tested by an independent lab.
That's true.
And I would say an independent lab, I'm not knocking it, but I would say an independent lab in the state of Florida, to be honest with you.
Well, no, absolutely. Yeah, there is, as far as the hemp program, there is one lab, I think, that's in Las Vegas.
Right.
And I'm not really sure how they got into the mix, but, there's 3 other labs here in the state of Florida that have been approved by FDACS. What I would say is, for cultivators, for farmers, processors, make sure that you understand what is your responsibility, at each stage of the process. As a cultivator, what is your responsibility to FDACS to prove to them that is it just that compliance? Because what I've seen as other labs, they're trying to upsell, so, oh yeah, you need pesticides at this stage and you need to know this. What is your responsibility? How do you get to the point where you feel comfortable, that you've done your due diligence as far as compliance to the state? There's no need to overtest if it's not necessary, but there is a process. Understand that process, understand what your responsibility is at each level. And then if there's a question mark, give me a call and we'll try to help you and guide you in the right direction.
And I guess really the lab is, some people may say the lab is not your friend. It's like anything else.
That. I don't like hearing that.
But the lab truly is your friend. They are working for you, but in the same respect, they have a responsibility to the state. So they have an open conversation with them, because they're there to help you and report your results to the state on a reasonable manner. But get you in the point where you feel comfortable on how and what you're giving them and how it's being tested.
Right. Some of the best parts of my day are talking to clients and customers and people, just having one-on-one with them. And I learn a lot from them and what they're planning to do, and they can learn hopefully from what we're doing. But I really enjoy talking to the cultivators. And my background is not only chemistry, but I'm actually an agronomist from the University of Florida, so I have an agronomy background. And so I love talking, farm, and I love talking about those types of things. So, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to call us. I really feel that you're in good hands with Americanna.
Great. Stephen, I appreciate that. And we will, this will be kind of the first chapter of many. We're going to kind of
Yeah,
follow the process. The process is changing, I wouldn't say hourly, but probably at least
fast.
monthly as
Yeah,
new regulations come into effect and changing it. And we're going to keep up with Stephen and keep you informed about it. I
absolutely.
appreciate it. And we'll see you at the next recording. Thank you,
Sounds
Stephen.
good. Thanks so much, Charles.